All right, so we're going to go to kpmfiles.com. You guys can go later, but it'd be helpful for you to remember all this. I've moved things around a little bit, try to make it easier for you to find things. All our marketing materials here, any documents that you would need if you manage a property with us, meaning that we are the managers and you guys are the representatives that refer it to us. Vendor packages, people who want to work with us in terms of vendors. My lease class that I normally give. And you can see down here, service and emotional support animals. Here's all my documentation. Here's the highlighted form that I use in class. And this is the actual HUD one that you can use as a blank slate. And you can also find it online for free from HUD. So as I said, we're going to be using this highlighted HUD. I am not going to cover everything within the document. What I want you guys to understand today is exactly what we're going to be looking at in terms of the different points and questions that you would need to advise your owner to use when trying to qualify a tenant who is asking for what they call a reasonable accommodation. A reasonable accommodation is a tenant requesting the ability to see or have really a emotional support or a service animal within the home. Okay, and it says a person with a disability may request a reasonable accommodation, okay, including support animals under FHA. This is to provide a best set of practices, like you can see right here. Best set of practices. Okay. You guys will need to go back and read through this to understand it better, but you will certainly know how to apply it when you leave this class today in the next 30 to 45 minutes. If you have any specific questions, please write it in the chat, and I will look often at the chat to answer those questions. So the biggest point that we should take away today is assistance animals are not pets. All right, and we're going to cover this at the end, but it's also good to cover this in the beginning because everybody always asks, can I charge a pet fee? Can I charge a pet deposit? The answer is no. Pet fee says pet. Pet deposit also says pet. If an assistance animal is not a pet, then it doesn't apply to them. It's very clear, it's not a pet. When you guys think about an emotional support animal or a service animal, I want to make sure somebody who's speaking, mute. You want to make sure that you understand that this is really a tool. That a service animal and emotional support animal are the equivalent of, let's say, a wheelchair or crutches or a special bed designed to move the person upwards or downwards, upside down. It's a tool. It's no longer a pet, okay? And there's two distinctions. One is a service animal, and another one is referred to as a therapeutic emotional support for individuals. In this case, they call it a support animal, okay? So two different ones, support animal and service animal. As I told you, this document is available for you to download through Google. Is a support animal a pet? So let's go back to the beginning because that was the first thing that we talked about. It says right here, assistance animals are not pets. And this doc be shared with clients. Yes, the document can be shared with clients. This is online for free in Google. I'm not doing anything special. This is not something I created. The only thing I'm doing for you is giving you guys a walkthrough, a presentation of what the document says. So it says service animals. The first type of animals is service animal, okay? And it says FHA requires that housing providers to modify or make exceptions to policies governing animals when it may be necessary to permit persons with a disability to utilize an animal. So it's a requirement, it's a law, it's something that you have to do. And if anybody went to Rock the Market last week, they said it's one of the biggest hot topics for legal battles coming, right? So here it says, what exactly is a service animal? Service animal means any dog. And when I say dog, only dog. No cats, no turtles, no horses, no fishies, nothing. It is only a dog. A service animal is only a dog. So the most common one that most people think about is a seeing eye dog. That is a service animal, okay? It is trained individually to perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, and or other mental disability. Other species of animals, whether wild or domestic, trained or untrained, are not service animals for the purposes of this definition. So again, no cats, no turtles, no pigs, no horses, no donkeys they cannot be considered a service animal. So again, seeing eye dog is a very good example of what a service animal is. So HUD and FHA, when they created this document, they made it very easy for everyone to come through here and go through the process and answer the questions that they allow you to ask. The minute you start asking additional questions that you're not supposed to ask, you could be in violation of certain laws and you could be held accountable. You could lose your license. As I like to say, maybe sometimes they might even give you a new home, 6x6, 3 square meals a day. So you don't want to play that game. You want to make sure that you follow these questions only. So with regards to service animal, the person comes in and says, I have a service animal. Okay, great. So then you go to the question for service animals. Is the animal a dog? Yes. Okay, very good. Is it readily apparent that the dog trained to do or perform the task and benefit of the individual or disability? So can you guys see very clearly that that dog is performing a task for that person? Again, seeing eye dog is very, very simple. If you can answer yes to these two questions, you're done, right? That means you move forward and you say, yes, you can have the dog there in the property, no questions asked, no security deposits, no pet fees, no pet deposits, nothing like that for the dog. Okay, you should approve it right away. Now, in some cases, it's not very easy to see. If no, then it says go to the next question. So again, this is a step-by-step process. I'm not doing anything special here. The next question says, it is advisable for all housing providers to limit its inquiries to the following two questions. What does that say? Please don't ask any more than these two questions. Is the animal required because of a disability? Number one. And number two, what work or task has the animal been trained to perform? Those are the only two questions you can ask. You can't say, oh, what disability do you have? When did you get the disability? How long have you had it? How does it hinder you from doing your day-to-day? Those questions you will see they're not here. Why? Because you're not supposed to ask that, because that's something very private to that person. If the person says, oh, I have a dog that smells my body for diabetes and high blood sugar, which does exist, then they can say that because they say it, but you didn't ask them, why do you have a dog for the disability? You don't want to do that. All you want to say is, what work does it do? And does it help you with a specific disability? Because, is it required because of a disability? If they can answer those questions clearly and thoughtfully without any issue, then again, the housing provider, which is the owner, should allow that animal, that dog, to come into the property. Okay. Now, we will get some no's, and when we get some no's, the answer says, for example, in number one, it's not a dog. Let's say it's a cat. It says to proceed to part number two. Again, a very clear line of where you should go so that you know how to answer these questions. And mind you, I want to make sure I say this again multiple times, that the person who should be doing this is the owner, not you. Your scope of work is to obtain a tenant, give that tenant information to an owner, and the owner then make an educated decision based on the information that you provided. You don't want to get in the legal process of accepting people because of this, but at least you will be able to explain this to your owners so that they understand the gravity and the scope and the process to do it, okay? So let's go down to section number 2, right here, analysis. A reasonable accommodation, we already talked about what that is, right? Accommodating the tenant in a reasonable way. So let's talk about it for a second. If we were to look at a reasonable accommodation in Miami, and let's talk about Brickell, is it reasonable to say that a person can have a horse, which is an animal that's accepted as an emotional support animal, but is it reasonable to say that we would have a horse inside an apartment at the Epic building in downtown Brickell where you pay $8,000, $9,000, and $10,000 worth of rent a month? There's nowhere to put that horse. There's nowhere for that horse to go poop. There's nowhere for you to have the stable with the hay and all the stuff that you would need to handle that horse. Is it reasonable to say that you could have a horse in a place in Opelika, not Opelika, I'm sorry, now I forgot the name, in the middle of Central Florida, any one of those farming areas, or Ocala, thank you. That's the one I was thinking about. Or even the place that's close to Davie, that has a bunch of farmland just off of I-75, which I can't think of the name. West Ranches, Southwest Ranches? Southwest Ranches. So if the person's renting a place there and they want to have a horse, that could be a reasonable accommodation, okay? So that's how you should think about reasonable accommodation. And so they ask more questions here. A resident may request a reasonable accommodation before or after acquiring the assistance animal, meaning they could ask you after they get it, or they can ask you before they get it, okay? Has the individual requested a reasonable accommodation, that is, asked to get or keep an animal in connection with a physical or mental impairment? That's your next question. If you had all no's up here, right? If you had no's at the top, then you come down to number 4, and then you can ask this question. Okay. If yes, if it is a mental impairment or disability, then you need to go to number 3. If it's a no, the housing provider is not required to grant a reasonable accommodation. So here very clearly, if we go through number 1 and it's not a dog and now it's a cat, they don't have to provide it. Okay. Next question, does the person have an observable disability, or does the housing provider or agent making the determination for the housing provider already have information giving them reason to believe that the person has a disability? So what's a good indicator right here? The person did their due diligence as a realtor, talked to their tenants and said, Mr. Tenant, do you have a dog, a cat, some kind of animal that provides assistance in any way that we need to declare to the providers? And then they say, oh yeah, here's my doctor's note. My therapist wrote me a letter to have this emotional support animal, and they can go through that, and you guys have already been given the details. They may even tell you verbally, okay? If they do, then you can continue to move forward. If yes, then you have to skip to number 7. If no, then you continue the next question. And HUD is very good about explaining what observable impairments are, including blindness, low vision, deafness, being hard of hearing, right? Mobility limitations. This sounds like me right now. I'm getting old and I'm having a hard of hearing and mobility limitations. Doesn't mean that I can get a dog or a cat, right? Things that happen like strokes, Parkinson's, cerebral palsy. It's very clear here about what you can and can't do. Has the person requesting the accommodation provided information? Again, did they give you a doctor's note or something like that? If they did, then you proceed to number 7. If they did not, then they do not have to accept it. Again, yes, no, yes, no. Very simple process. Okay, so this is good information for you right now because everybody has doubts about this. What is good information? A determination of disability from a federal, state, or local government agency. Receipt of disability benefits from Social Security, Medicare, okay, veteran disability benefits, service vocational rehabilitation center. All this information right here gives you a good or reasonable information that can provide you with the answer of yes, we should move forward with allowing this tenant to have a reasonable accommodation and have that animal in the place. Okay, so again, I don't want to cover every single piece of this document because it's a very, very rich and full of information document, and you have to process it at your own pace and maybe read it several times to get it. What I want you to know is that it's here. The information that you guys are always asking for is here for you to get at any time. Okay. So documentation from the internet, very, very important. You guys all know that a lot of people are cheating the system, logging in online, paying $50, $60, $70, $100 and getting a fake certificate to say that their dog has the right to be considered an emotional support animal or a service animal. Okay. And it says right here very clearly, in HUD's experience, such documentation from the internet is not by itself sufficient or reliable enough to establish that the individual has a non-observable disability. Okay, so certificates of the internet, basically no good. It's not by itself. Now, if you do get one of the documents that we talked about up here earlier, right? Or if you get a letter from a doctor, person's healthcare professional that confirms a disability and the need for the animal when the provider has knowledge of the individual. If they have a primary care physician, if they have a therapist, if they have a nurse, optometrist, or somebody that says, we need it for this tenant, you pretty much have to accept it. You may not like it, the owner may not like it, but it's hard for you to fight. And I don't want you guys fighting too much. I want you guys to just kind of walk through the process. I've done this several times with the tenants, the owners, and the agents all at the same time. And I tell the tenants, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we're going to sit down, we're going to review this document, we're going to go through it together to make sure that we don't make any mistakes because I want to work with you. And if you have the right to have a pet or a service animal, emotional support animal, I want you to have it. But because I'm not an attorney and because this is not very easy to do, I want to walk through this all together so that we can reach a reasonable agreement with regards to what the law says. And so I will begin to ask, number one, is it a dog? Yes, perfect. Number two, and I go through, and then eventually they get to the no's, and then the no says, well, it says you can't have it based on the information. Do you agree? And they say, well, yes. And then they say, well, in order for you to have a pet, you have to pay a pet deposit or a pet fee or both. Or in some cases, we have to say the owner doesn't want to have a pet. And the great thing is that the reality is that the tenant answered the questions to a point where it's not the owner saying no anymore. Now it's a tenant who agrees that based on this information, they're not supposed to have it. So a good information for you to have that right there, okay? So if they provided enough information that says, hey, we should have this animal, then the owner should make the discretion to, make a lease and allow them to move in. Again, if they do not, then the housing provider is not required to grant the accommodation. So now, commonly kept animals. Is this a commonly kept animal? Perfect, yes or no. If it's not, then a reasonable accommodation is not provided. So what are common animals? Because everybody asked this right here. And you can see for purpose assessment, reptiles other than turtles, barnyard animals, monkeys, kangaroos, and other domesticated animals are not considered common animals, right? So what is a dog, a cat, a small bird, rabbit, hamster, gerbil, other rodents, fish, turtle, small domesticated animals. Those are commonly. Now, unique animals. If the individual is requesting to keep a unique type of animal that is not commonly kept in a household, okay, then they have a substantial burden as tenants to prove that they really need that specific animal. That means the burden is on the tenant. The tenant has to prove that they can have that. All right, so we're getting towards the end of this class. It's very fast. We're going to certainly have a Q&A at the end, so please don't worry. This page here is like the bullet point summary of stuff. It is page 14, and I think it's very good because it's very clear. And when you encounter an association that says no to an animal or is requiring some kind of pet fee or pet deposit, I love to send this kind of documentation with my highlights because then they're going to read it and then they're going to have doubts. And a majority of associations are not making very good, informed, or legal decisions. But unfortunately, a lot of tenants don't have the finances or don't want to fight it. And the realtors certainly don't want to fight the fight because they want to be able to rent again. And if you get blackballed from that association, especially if you deal with them quite a bit, you don't want to be blackballed, right? So a housing provider may not charge a fee for processing a reasonable accommodation. Pet rules, again, do not apply to service animals and support animals. Thus, housing providers may not limit the breed, the size of the dog, okay, or the support animal because of the size of breed. But it can, as noted, limit based on specific issues with the animal's conduct. If the dog bites somebody, you can certainly, the association of the owner can certainly go against that tenant. So it is important to understand that there are limitations, but it's not taking away safety issues. The dog bites somebody, the dog is out free walking the dog without a leash. Okay, you're still required to walk the dog with a leash. You're still required to have the dog under your control. If the tenant does not follow those types of rules, then it could be an issue. Housing may not provide or charge a deposit. We talked about this in the beginning, a fee, a surcharge, application fee, nothing like that. But it can charge for damages off of the standard security deposits. So I'd like to talk about this for a second. Standard security deposits. We know that the norm is usually first, last, and security. As I continue to do a lot of work with properties, I manage about 250 properties right now. The damages that are done by some tenants are far more than 1 month. And because they're far more than 1 month, I like to get 2 months of security deposit. So I get first and 2 securities. If you have a situation where you have an owner, you should always recommend first and 2 securities, because when the pet becomes involved, which is really not a pet, it's a service animal and most sport animal, or any other reason, you have a lot more money to protect the owner from those damages to make sure they're covered with 2 security deposits than 1. So very, very important. This is the last piece, and I know I've said it a couple of times, and I think that based on how I told you how I deal with the tenants, with the owners, the tenants, and the realtors all at the same time, getting to a position of whether or not they should or should not have that animal, this is the lesson learned by FHA and HUD. Before denying a reasonable accommodation request due to lack of information confirming an individual's disability or disability-related need of the animal, the housing provider is encouraged to engage in good faith dialogue with the requester, called the interactive process. All right, what does that mean? Dialogue. As realtors, Send multiple emails, send multiple text messages, documenting that you wanted to work with that tenant to make sure that you were entering into an interactive process of dialogue. If it ever goes to court and the tenant says they denied me because I had an emotional support animal and they didn't allow me to have it, you're going to have all those emails. We call it CYA, right? Everybody knows CYA. You're going to have that information to be able to show that you had a good interest. You made a good faith effort, that you wanted to try to help the tenant, but they were the ones that didn't answer the questions, did not provide the proper documentation, so that when it gets to court, the judge is going to say, I see all the emails, I see all the requests, and I don't see anything going back. And they're going to ask the tenant, do you have any of that information provided back to the owner? No, they're going to be out of gas. So as you guys know, a lot of times when I speak to you, I try to make sure that you guys are not doing something outside of your scope of work. Your scope of work is to obtain a tenant. Your scope of work is to make sure that the lease is written the right way. Your scope of work is to make sure that the move-in is completed and provided the funds, and the rest is up to the owner. If the owner gets a tenant after they move in, then they're going to have to deal with the tenant. And you're going to have to give them this document saying, hey, this is the document that is provided by HUD, okay? You can use this as a guide to see whether or not the tenant qualifies or should be allowed to have the reasonable accommodation. Okay, let's see here. So now I'm going to open up to Q&A. I'm going to start looking at these questions. Sylvia says, so the owner can refuse pets but not service animals? Correct. If the owner doesn't want to have a pet inside of the house, he doesn't have to accept it. If it is now a service animal or a qualified emotional support animal or a support animal, they will absolutely have to accept it. And if they don't, then they're in violation of HUD and FHA. All right. Elaine, you are asking about this as discussed in the very beginning of the class. This is open to everybody at kpmfiles.com under service animals. I'm going to write it here for you, kpmfiles.com. This has been available to everybody since like 2020. I'm going to show you here. July 17th, 2020, I've had this available to all realtors, either at the bottom of my email address or email signature, or through the many times that I've shared it on the chats of each office and the times that I've shared it at the offices. So this is available to everybody. I hope that answered your question, Elaine. All right, good. So now, any other questions? You can open up. You can ask the questions verbally.
Mark, I do have a question. This is Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. I actually have a situation, or it's not a situation, but right now I'm about to execute a lease. We already executed the contract to lease. The tenants have, I have the landlord side. The tenants have an emotional support animal. They have provided that information, the letter. They are on their own. My client did not request it. They have said that they would give a $500 pet fee, of which $250 would be refundable. Is that okay if it's proposed by them as opposed to my client?
I mean, certainly if you have it documented in somewhere, you're going to be able to CYA yourself, but it's muddy waters. Later on, they can say, no, they told me verbally that they really had to have it, so we did it. So okay. I would just encourage you not to do it, because okay. it doesn't look good.
All right, so, I will, yeah, I'll check, I'll do a, I'll backpedal to see what we have as far as stock.
Would encourage everybody to understand that a tenant can walk into the property on the day of move-in with a service animal and emotional support animal, and everybody's going to say, you didn't tell me you had pets, because that's the standard answer, right? And the tenant can look at you and technically say, I don't have any pets, because this is not considered a pet. So you have to be very careful when you see that. That's why it's important that you guys read through this documentation so that you can talk to tenants with the basics of understanding, because I don't want you to remember everything else other than a service animal and an emotional support animal is not a pet. That's number one. Number two, you cannot take any kind of pet fees or pet deposits. Number three, where's the document that shows all the questions that I should ask? Because I'm going to follow it to the T, and I'm not going to go or divert away from that. This is going to be my guide, because I think that the smartest person is not the one that has everything memorized and can say it off the tip of their tongue. The smartest person is the one who knows where all the information is so they can use it when they need it. Okay, I have 250 properties, and all the time the tenants say, how much is my rent? How much is my late fee? When does my contract expire? And I'm like, I'm on the road. I need to go back to the office and check the system, and I can give you the proper information. Don't be afraid not to know what you have to do in terms of questions. Just know where you have to go get the questions to make it easier for yourself to do a good job and be a professional and go above and beyond, because most realtors will not do what I just said. Sit down with the tenant, sit down with the owner, sit down with the realtors, and everybody's going to get an education on what the process is. And the minute a tenant and a realtor sees U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, they're like, man, this person really knows what they're doing, because they have all the information here ready to go. Okay. Next question.
Mark, I just wanted to make I wanted to not make a comment, but ask a question, because I just had a similar, not an issue. I'm trying to see if these clients can have a dog. I mean, their emotional dog go. And the funny thing is that they come back and say, okay, need the original note, the picture, the dates, the shots, the state certificate. Be advised, it says, animal cannot be walked on property or catwalk. So what do you do about that?
The animal cannot be walked where? I'm sorry?
It says here, be advised, animal cannot be walked on property or catwalk. It's a catwalk building. So where do you walk the dog? Or what are they?
And they know that it's an emotional support animal?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know that that's possible, because let's talk about service animal. Because the reality is that your ability to have the animal, whether it's a service animal or an emotional support animal, is pretty much anywhere. So the minute you don't allow it to happen, let's say a CNI dog, you're telling the person who's blind that they can't have a CNI dog while walking a catwalk? The only other thing that I can think of is maybe they're thinking that the dog might fall off the bridge, because a catwalk is a bridge, right?
Oh, no.
No?
No, it's a catwalk building is a building where the hallways are open to the air. It's not an enclosed building. A catwalk building is a building that you could see all the doors on the floors, like here in Aventura, there's a few buildings that are not luxury buildings, they're simple buildings, and they're called catwalk.
Yeah.
And
I'm not an attorney, and certainly I haven't been tested in a way to be able to tell you what the answer is. My first assumption is no. I think that they should make sure that they have a leash, like Elaine says, and that they're being controlled, and that maybe in the catwalk, it's not the place for them to be peed and walked in terms of like relieving themselves.
no,
right?
I get it, but when they're telling you that not to walk it on the property, how do you not walk a dog, period? How do you not walk an animal, like you say, even a seeing eye dog, it's a little dog, actually.
Yeah, I don't have that answer for you. That would need to be
Yeah.
an attorney that gives you that answer. It's above my pay grade, and I don't even get paid for this, right? In terms of in terms of this class, this is something that I generated just to be able to meet with you guys and talk to you about
Of
property.
course.
Other questions?
But I thought it was the silliest thing, and I asked him, so where are you supposed to walk the dog? I wrote back, this is all an email, and I wrote back, so where do you walk the dog? He hasn't answered me yet.
Yeah,
So
you'll probably need to go in and clarify that. Other questions?
Yeah. No. Thank you.
No? All right. So I will share a couple of things with you guys so you guys know. Under marketing materials, You have the different property managers in the different counties. You can see my marketing information here in English and Spanish. So if you want to share that with your owners and they're interested in property management. Our rental screening file is here as well, so you can share that with people about how you screen. It's a nice add-on for your listing appointment. Short-term rental management. People are always asking about short-term rental and what the options are. Here's the flyer that you can share with the window width, no, page width. You can share this with your owners as well. Information is here, the phone number to call Benji and ask him about the terms and conditions of short-term rentals like Airbnb and VRBO. And then this is relatively old, you can see 2022, but this gives a list of properties that do short-term rentals. I'd love to get somebody to give me an updated one if they can. Short-term rental policies in Miami. So good information for you to have here. Tenant credit boost. People are always wanting to share this flyer. You can send this flyer off to your tenants so they can improve their credit and become buyers, which that will make them happy. They'll report their rental payments and they can go back up to 2 years. So all these pieces are nice little pieces for you to either send off a touch point with your clients to make sure that they know that you're trying to give them resources to be able to become homeowners. Okay. I don't know if you guys saw it or not. I would greatly appreciate you following me and or going to the place where I advertised on Instagram and commenting on the class if you learned something, if it was beneficial for you. Trying to expand out and teach more realtors about this kind of information because I think it's great information to have. So if you can, follow me and then comment on the actual link of, of today's class. That's the service and support animals. Here's my contact information. When you follow my contact information, you'll be able to see quite a bit of information so that you can have it at your disposal and on your phone. Aventura has an awesome link tree. And they actually added to that. I'm gonna give you guys mine. So when you go to this QR code, you will get this page. And this page is full of information. Talks about Kai's property management and the things that we do. Talks about rental screening, how much it costs, the things that we cover, tenant credit boosts as well. The KPM files link goes straight there. My Savvy PM website, which is my property management blog that I've been creating, my social media, all the links again. So all this information is there for you guys whenever you want. All you need to do is have this QR code, scan it, and save it on your phone as a link. And with that, I thank everybody for their time. If you have any questions or concerns, you can certainly give me a call. Any other final comments, just to make sure I didn't miss anybody? Great information. Thank you, Sylvia. Can you go back to follow me shots? Yes. Follow me. There you go. Thank you, Victor. All righty, everybody. You have a good one.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, you see it, don't panic, you don't get the.